My son-in-law threw my coffee mug into the sink, looked me dead in the eye, and told me that a man who doesn't contribute doesn't get to sit at the table. My daughter stood 3 feet away and said nothing. So I stood up, walked to my room, and pulled out the bag I had already packed the night before. They thought they were pushing out a broken-down old carpenter with bad knees and a pension that barely covered his prescriptions. What they didn't know was that the house they were standing in, the cars in the driveway, the credit cards in their wallets, and the office lease on my son-in-law's so-called real estate firm were all running on my money. They had just cut the one thread holding their whole life together, and I let them do it with a smile. My name is Raymond Cole. I am 67 years old. I spent 40 years with calluses on my hands and sawdust in my boots, and for 40 years I let people see exactly what they wanted to see. A working man. A simple man. A man who fixed things with his hands and didn't have much to say at fancy dinners. What nobody saw, what I made sure nobody saw, was the other side of Raymond Cole. The side that had been quietly buying up distressed commercial properties across Nashville since 1987. The side that owned the parking structures downtown and the warehouse complex out on Route 40. The side that had incorporated Cole Development Group when my daughter was still in diapers and had been growing it in silence ever since. My late wife, Dorothy, understood why I hid it. She used to say that money changes people the moment they know it's near. She wanted our daughter to grow up knowing the value of $1, not the taste of an unlimited one. When Dorothy passed 4 years ago, I made a decision. I would move in with Claire, not because I needed her, but because I wanted to see her. I wanted to be close to the only piece of Dorothy I had left. I told myself I would stay 6 months. That was 2 years ago. The house in Franklin was mine. I had purchased it through a trust 6 months before Claire's wedding, a wedding gift I never announced. I let them believe they were making the mortgage payments. I had the auto drafts running from an account Claire had never heard of, through a management company whose name meant nothing to her. Marcus believed he was the provider. He believed it completely. The way a man believes a lie he's been allowed to tell long enough. He was a real estate agent who hadn't closed a deal in 8 months, living inside a financial structure built entirely by the man he treated like a house guest who'd overstayed his welcome. That morning started like most mornings. I was at the kitchen table with my coffee and the newspaper. The actual paper, the kind Marcus mocked me for subscribing to. He came downstairs, already dressed for a showing that I knew, from the stack of overdue invoices I had found in the recycling bin, was never going to happen. He went to the coffee pot, found it empty, and turned around with a look on his face that I had been watching build for 2 years. He picked up my mug. He looked at it the way a man looks at something that offends him by existing. Then he turned and dropped it into the steel sink with a hard, deliberate clang that bounced off every surface in that kitchen. "I need coffee, Raymond," he said. He always called me Raymond. Never Dad, never Sir. Always my first name, delivered like a small correction. "And since you're up and I'm not, that seems like a reasonable division of labor, don't you think? You sitting here reading a paper that's already 2 days old while the rest of us are out here working." I looked at the mug in the sink. I looked at my daughter, who was leaning against the refrigerator with her arms crossed, watching the floor tiles like they were about to say something interesting. "I'll make my own coffee when I'm ready," I said. "The machine's right behind you." Marcus laughed. It was the kind of laugh that isn't a laugh at all. He came and stood at the head of the table, close enough that I could smell the cologne he bought on my credit card. "Here's the thing," he said. "Claire and I have been talking, and we think it's time to get clear on some boundaries. You're here, and we love having you here. But you need to be contributing, not just existing. You need to be useful." I looked at my daughter then, because I needed to see her face when she heard that word. Useful. She didn't look up. "Marcus," she said, so quietly it was almost not a sentence. "Just tell him what we decided." He put both hands flat on the table. "We think you should either start pulling your weight around here, and I mean really helping. Cooking, cleaning, running errands, whatever we need. Or we think it's time you found somewhere else to be. There are assisted living communities that are very nice, Raymond. Places where you'd have people your own age, activities, supervision if you need it. We've actually already made some calls." The word supervision landed like a thumbtack in my sternum. I looked at my daughter. She finally looked up. There was an expression on her face that I had never seen before and have spent every day since trying to forget. It was not cruelty. It was worse than cruelty. It was relief. She looked relieved that someone else was finally saying the thing she had been thinking. I pushed my chair back. I stood up slowly, because my knees are what they are, and I walked to the hallway without a word. I heard Marcus say something behind me about finally, but I was already down the hall and through my door. The bag was on the closet shelf. I had packed it the previous night, not because I knew exactly when this moment would come, but because a man who has been watching a storm build on the horizon for 2 years learns to keep his umbrella by the door. I zipped the bag. I took one look around the room. I had brought almost nothing when I moved in. I left with almost nothing now. There was one framed photograph on the nightstand. Dorothy and me on the front steps of our first property, a 6-unit building on Gallatin Pike that I bought for $40,000 in 1989 and sold for 11 times that amount in 2003. I tucked it into the side pocket of the bag. I walked back through the living room. They were in the kitchen. I could hear Marcus telling Claire that this was the right call, that they needed their space, that I would be fine, that I always landed on my feet. I did not stop to correct him on the sequence of events he was about to experience. I opened the front door and walked out into a Tuesday morning in October. The sky was the particular blue that Nashville gets in autumn, clear and cold and indifferent. I walked to the end of the driveway and stopped. I pulled out my phone and called my attorney. Walter Briggs had been with me since the second property. He picked up before the second ring. "It's done," I said. "Begin the separation protocol. Full withdrawal. Cards, mortgage subsidy, the office lease, the auto payments. All of it. I want everything disconnected by end of business today." "Understood," Walter said. "The car is 2 blocks east." "Good." I walked east. The October air was clean and the leaves were turning, and I felt, underneath the grief that was already settling into my chest, something close to peace. A man can only carry a borrowed life for so long before the weight of it starts to feel like the real thing. The black Suburban turned the corner with the quiet confidence of a car that has never had to hurry. My driver, a man named Gerald who had worked for me for 16 years, stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. He took my bag. I got in. "The Hermitage?" he said. "Please," I said. "And Gerald, go past the long way. I want to see the Dumb and Bruin building." We drove through downtown Nashville. I watched the city through the tinted window. On the corner of 5th and Dem and Bruin, a 12-story mixed-use development was 3 floors from completion. Cole Development Group had broken ground on it 14 months ago. My name was not on the sign outside. It never was. But the building was mine. And looking at it that morning, rising above the street with its steel bones catching the autumn sun, I felt the particular satisfaction of a man who has never needed anyone to know what he built. We pulled up to the Hermitage Hotel. The doorman, who knew me by name and by preference, was already moving toward the car before Gerald had shifted into park. 4 miles away, at that exact moment, Marcus Webb was standing in the kitchen of the house I owned, pressing the button on the espresso machine that I had been paying the electric bill to power, and feeling like a man who had just solved a problem. He was not yet aware that the problem was only beginning. It took 48 hours. Marcus had a client dinner at a restaurant called the 12 South Tap Room that Wednesday evening. He had been pursuing this particular client, a developer from Memphis named Patterson, for 6 weeks. He told Claire it was the meeting that was going to change everything, the one that was going to prove that his business was not struggling. It was simply between peaks. He wore his best suit, the charcoal one I had watched him put on his Amex the previous spring. He ordered the Wagyu. He ordered a bottle of Camus for the table. He talked about his pipeline of listings and his plans for expansion and his vision for the Nashville market. When the check came, he reached for the Amex with the ease of a man who has never once thought about where money comes from. The waiter returned. He leaned down and spoke quietly, but the booth was small, and Claire heard every word. "I'm sorry, sir. This card was declined." Marcus didn't change his expression. "Run it again. There's been a fraud hold. This happens when you travel." "I ran it twice, sir." Marcus pulled out the backup visa. The one attached to the business account that he believed was funded by his commissions, but was actually subsidized by a quarterly transfer from one of my holding companies, because his commissions, in the last 3 quarters combined, had not covered his own lease payment. That card came back in 90 seconds. Declined. Patterson from Memphis folded his napkin and placed it on the table with the careful deliberateness of a man making a statement without needing to use words. He excused himself to take a phone call and did not come back. Marcus paid the bill in cash, everything he had in his wallet, which covered the food but not the wine. The manager was gracious about it in the way that costs a man more than an unpaid bottle of Camus ever could. They drove home in silence. The house was warm, but not the right kind of warm. Marcus sat on the couch and went through every card in his wallet, calling the numbers on the back one by one. Declined. Cancelled. Account closed. Suspended pending review. Claire sat across from him in the chair she always sat in, watching her husband's jaw get tighter with each call, and something began to move in her that she could not yet name. "Your father," Marcus said, and it was not a question. Claire said nothing. "Your father did something to the accounts. He called someone. He's trying to punish us for asking him to contribute. This is what he does, Claire. This is control. This is manipulation. He's been manipulating you your whole life, and you can't see it." Claire looked at the window. Outside, the October dark was complete. "He didn't have access to your accounts, Marcus," she said. "Then how?" "Because they were never your accounts." She didn't say it with anger. She said it the way you say something you've known for a while and have been choosing not to look at directly. Marcus stared at her. Claire stood up and went to bed. She did not answer when he knocked on the door. The next morning, Marcus went looking. He started with the mortgage company. The representative pulled up the account and told him, politely and with the efficiency of someone who has delivered this information before, that the mortgage on the Franklin property was held in the name of the Dorothy and Raymond Cole Family Trust, that the monthly payments had been drafted from a trust account, and that said trust account had been suspended as of yesterday afternoon by the primary trustee, one Raymond Cole, and that as of the current date, no mortgage payment had been received for the upcoming month, and that the property would enter a notice of default process in 60 days if payment was not received. Marcus sat in his car in the driveway for a long time. He needed to find me. He needed to find the source and cut it back on. He knew I was not at a shelter. He knew I had left in a car that wasn't a taxi, but in his mind, the explanation still fit inside a box he could manage. I was a stubborn old man, with a mechanic's pension and a carpenter's savings. Whatever I had accumulated over a lifetime, he could negotiate with it. He could threaten. He could appeal to Claire. There was a number somewhere, and if he could get in front of me, he could make me name it. He drove to the address he had found on a piece of mail he'd once seen on my desk, an address in East Nashville, one of the older neighborhoods, before the renovations came. He found a 3-story brick apartment building on Fatherland Street. He buzzed the intercom for the building manager. A woman came down. She looked at Marcus the way East Nashville looks at a man in a charcoal suit who doesn't belong. "I'm looking for Raymond Cole," he said. "He lives here." The woman tilted her head. "Raymond Cole doesn't live here. This is his address. I've seen it on his mail. Raymond Cole owns this building," she said, "and the 2 next to it. He hasn't lived here since before I was born. He just comes around on the 1st of the month to check on the place." She looked Marcus up and down. "You related to him?" Marcus drove back to Franklin without answering. That night, he told Claire what the woman had said. Claire sat with it for a long moment and then said that the woman must be confused, that her father was a carpenter, that she had grown up watching him work on weekends for extra cash. Marcus agreed. He needed her to agree. If Raymond Cole owned buildings in East Nashville, then the entire architecture of Marcus Webb's self-image was sitting on nothing. He decided to look harder. He went through the drawer in my old room that I hadn't fully emptied, and he found a business card at the back of it, slipped between 2 old receipts. The card read, "Briggs & Associates, Counsel to Cole Development Group." Marcus sat on the edge of my bed and turned the card over in his hand. Cole Development Group. He opened his laptop and typed it in. The first result was a Nashville Business Journal profile from 3 years ago. The headline read, Cole Development Group completes acquisition of Demon Brune corridor properties in $34 million transaction. There was no photograph of the principals. There was a quote attributed to the company's founder, who was identified only as a Nashville area native who prefers to keep a low profile. Marcus closed the laptop. He opened it again. He closed it again. He needed to be certain. He needed to see me in person, on my turf, in a context that could not be explained away. He needed the confrontation that would either prove he was right or destroy him. He found the answer the following morning in the Nashville Chamber of Commerce newsletter. The annual Business Legacy Awards ceremony was that Friday evening at the Schermerhorn Symphony Center. The keynote presentation was listed as a special tribute to a longtime contributor to Nashville's commercial real estate landscape. The recipient's name was not printed. His organization was Cole Development Group. Marcus bought 2 tickets from a broker for $800 he borrowed from his mother without telling her why. I did not know he was coming. I arrived at the Schermerhorn in a suit I keep for occasions that require me to look like what I actually am, not what people assume I am. Walter met me at the side entrance with the evening's program. We reviewed the remarks I would deliver, and he reminded me, as he always does, that I could keep it under 5 minutes if I wanted. I told him I would need about 4. The room was full. Nashville's commercial development community is not large, but it is dense, and it was all there. City council members, the heads of 3 of the 4 major banks, architects and contractors, and the people who make a city rise floor by floor out of ground that used to be vacant. I found my seat at the center table and spent the first hour listening to other people be honored. There is a specific pleasure in watching honest work be recognized, even when it isn't yours. I became aware of a commotion near the back of the room approximately 30 minutes into the evening. A man in a charcoal suit was arguing with an usher about the seating chart. I did not turn around, but I recognized the voice. The MC, a woman named Patricia Kern, who anchors the 6 o'clock news and has been a friend of this community for 20 years, took the stage for the final presentation. She spoke about Cole Development Group for 4 minutes before she said my name. She talked about the East Nashville renovations of the 90s, about the charitable foundation Dorothy and I had started, about the workforce housing initiative that had provided 300 affordable units in the Bordeaux neighborhood. She talked about a man who had done all of this without ever standing in front of a camera. And then she said, "Would you please welcome tonight's Legacy Award recipient, the founder of Cole Development Group, Mr. Raymond Cole." The room stood up. I stood from my chair and turned toward the stage, and as I turned, I did not look at Patricia Kern. I did not look at the mayor, who was applauding in the front row. I looked at the back of the room, where a man in a charcoal suit was standing completely still, his program fallen from his hand to the carpet, his face the color of new concrete. I let him see me. I let him see the suit and the table and the people rising to their feet. I let him see the distance between the man who had thrown my coffee mug into the sink 48 hours ago and the man standing in the middle of the room accepting the recognition of a city. Then I turned away from him and walked toward the stage, because Marcus Webb had never deserved more than 1 second of my attention, and I had already given him 48 hours too many. I kept my remarks to 4 minutes. Afterward, Marcus pushed through the crowd toward me. He had Claire with him. I had not known she was there. Seeing her stopped me in a way that Marcus could not. She looked at me with an expression I recognized from the funeral, from the morning we scattered Dorothy's ashes, from every moment in her life when the ground had shifted beneath her and she didn't know which way to reach. She looked devastated in a way that was different from Marcus's devastation. His was the devastation of a man losing a resource. Hers was the devastation of a woman losing a version of her father she had constructed to make her own choices feel acceptable. Marcus grabbed my elbow. There were people all around us. He didn't care. "You have to fix this," he said, low and urgent and shaking. "Whatever you think we did, you made your point. Now turn it back on. We'll lose the house. We'll lose everything." I looked at his hand on my elbow until he removed it. "You told me I needed to be useful," I said, "or find somewhere else to be. I found somewhere else to be. You have everything you said you had. Your career, your talent, your business acumen. Apply them." "Dad," Claire said. And hearing her say it in that room, In that context, in that voice, was the hardest moment of the entire evening. Please, I looked at her. You watched him speak to me the way he spoke to me for 2 years, Claire. Every morning. You chose not to see it. And then when seeing it became unavoidable, you helped him deliver the message. You're not a child anymore. You knew. She covered her mouth with her hand. 2 people nearby had paused their conversations and were watching with the careful attention of people pretending not to watch. Walter, I said. My attorney materialized from somewhere to my left with the patience of a man who has done this before. Give them the envelope. Walter produced a cream-colored envelope from his jacket and handed it to Claire. Inside was a formal notice of termination of the trust's financial support, a 60-day vacate notice for the Franklin property, and a single personal check for $5,000 made out to Claire Cole, which was enough to cover first and last month's rent somewhere reasonable. Claire looked at the check. She looked at me. That's all I'm giving you, I said. Not to be cruel, because you've never had to stand on your own, and I let that go on for too long. The check is a start. The rest is yours to build. I walked away from them, and the room let me walk, and the night air outside the Schermerhorn was cold and clean and smelled like the river. What happened over the next several weeks? I learned mostly through Walter, and partly through the arrest record, which is public in Tennessee. Marcus drove back to Franklin that night in a state that was somewhere past desperate and approaching reckless. He had been in contact with a man named Doyle, a business associate of uncertain reputation who had helped him once before with a contract dispute by methods Marcus had been careful not to ask about. He called Doyle from the parking garage and told him about the Cole development properties. He had convinced himself, through the particular alchemy of panic and entitlement, that there were accounts or documents or assets somewhere inside the Franklin house that I had left behind, and that accessing them was simply a matter of taking what was already morally his. He broke the back door window with a landscaping stone from the garden and stepped into a house that was no longer his to enter. What he did not know was that I had installed a full commercial security system in that property the year I purchased it. The same grade I use in my warehouse facilities, including motion sensors, internal cameras, and an immediate alert to a private security firm. He had 11 minutes before they arrived. He spent those 11 minutes searching my old room, finding nothing except a small wooden box I had left in the closet deliberately. Inside the box was a handwritten note in my own handwriting, dated to the previous week, that said simply, "The only thing I ever hid from you was how much I loved your mother. Everything else was right in front of you." He did not understand it. He threw it against the wall. The private security firm arrived and held him at the property until the sheriff's deputies came. He was charged with breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, and destruction of property. He was released on bail funded by his mother. He never called me from jail. He called Claire. And Claire, who was sleeping on a friend's couch in Brentwood, with $5,000 in her checking account and a job application at a landscape architecture firm she had been too proud to submit for 3 years, answered the phone and told him she was sorry and that she could not help him and that she hoped he would be all right. She did not go to the bail hearing. She sent a card instead. The trial was 4 months later. I sat in the 3rd row behind the prosecution. I had requested that the charges not be escalated beyond what the evidence supported. Marcus's attorney argued that his client had been driven to his actions by the sudden and retaliatory withdrawal of financial support, that the emotional distress of discovering that his father-in-law had been secretly controlling his finances constituted a form of psychological manipulation that informed his state of mind. Walter stood for the response. He did not raise his voice. He had never once raised his voice in 40 years of practicing law, and he was not going to start for Marcus Webb. He held up a single green ledger book, the kind with the marbled cover that Dorothy had kept in the drawer of her sewing table for the last 20 years of her life. "This is Dorothy Cole's household record," Walter said. "She kept it from 1985 until her passing. It contains every major financial decision this family made, and the reasons behind it. I'd like to read 2 entries relevant to the defendant's claim that he was deceived." He found the first tab. September 1992. Raymond worked this whole month without a day off, including weekends, to put extra toward the Gallatin Pike payment before Claire starts school in the fall. He doesn't want to talk about the money around her. He says if she grows up thinking money is easy to get, she'll never learn how much it costs to keep. I think he's right. I also think he's the most stubborn man I've ever loved. Walter found the second tab. March 2018. Claire called today. She sounds happy. Marcus seems to be doing well. Raymond was quiet all evening. I asked him what was wrong. He said he was afraid she was letting someone else carry her. I asked him why he didn't say something to her. He said, "Because if I do, she'll just defend him, and I'll lose her. So I'll stay quiet and stay close, and hope she figures it out herself." The courtroom was very quiet. I looked at my hands. Dorothy had written that entry 8 months before she died, and I had never read it until Walter showed it to me 2 weeks ago, and I had not been able to speak for several minutes afterward. 2 rows behind me, in the center of the gallery, I felt rather than saw my daughter absorb those words. The jury convicted on all 3 counts. The judge sentenced Marcus to 18 months, suspended to 9 with probation, full restitution, and a permanent restraining order keeping him away from all Cole development properties. Marcus walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. He looked at Claire, who was sitting in the back row in a gray coat I didn't recognize, and she looked back at him with the specific emptiness of someone who has already finished grieving. I stood in the lobby afterward for a while. I was not sure what I was waiting for. I pulled on my coat. Walter said nothing, which is one of the things I pay him for. I heard footsteps behind me, quick and uncertain. The footsteps of someone who has changed their mind twice about whether to follow. I turned around. Claire stopped 6 feet away. She looked like her mother when her mother was tired. The same set of the jaw. The same way of holding her shoulders when she was trying not to fall apart. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. It came out faster than she intended. "I just want to say it. I knew, Dad. Maybe not all of it, but I knew enough. And I pretended not to, because it was easier. And I'm sorry." I looked at her for a moment. I thought about Dorothy's journal. I thought about the morning with the coffee mug and the look on Claire's face that I would spend a long time trying to forget. "I know you're sorry," I said. "I also know sorry takes a while to mean something. Keep going. Keep working." The landscape firm called me. By the way, her eyes moved. "I didn't interfere," I said. "I own the building. Their office is in. I saw your application in the tenant newsletter. I made no calls. That one is entirely yours." She exhaled. It was the exhale of a woman who had been holding her breath since October. "I have to get back," she said. "I have a site visit at 3. "Go," I said. She turned and walked toward the door. She pushed it open, and the afternoon light came in, and for just a second she was her mother's daughter standing in that light, and then she was gone. 9 months later, I was sitting on the back porch of the small house I keep in Leiper's Fork, the one nobody knows about, the one with the wood-burning stove and the garden Dorothy always planned to plant, and that I have spent the last 2 years planting for her. Gerald had the day off. Walter was at his own house with his own family. It was a Sunday in July, and the fireflies were beginning. The envelope was in my hand. It had arrived at the office on Friday, with no return address. Just my name in Claire's handwriting and a Brentwood postmark. Inside was a card she had made herself. Cardstock folded in half. A pencil drawing of a carpenter's level on the front. The kind of instrument you use to make sure the foundation is true. Inside she had written, "Dad, I got the promotion. I'm managing my first full project, a community garden and plaza in Germantown. I keep thinking you'd like the design. There's a bench in the middle of it. Maybe sometime I could show you. No obligations, no conditions. Just coffee, if you want." She had included something else. A gift card to the diner near her office, the one I had mentioned exactly once, 3 years ago, as having the best biscuits in Davidson County. $12. I sat with it for a long time. The fireflies moved through the garden, quiet and intermittent, like small signals from a world that is mostly patient. Dorothy would have told me not to wait. She would have said I had made the point, and it was time to go have the biscuits. I pulled out my phone and called Claire. She answered on the second ring. In the background, I could hear a television. Something low and ordinary. The sound of a regular evening in a life being lived. I got your card, I said. I wasn't sure if the drawing was good enough, she said. It was good enough, I said. Tell me about the Germantown project, she told me. I listened. We talked for an hour and 20 minutes, which is longer than we had talked in the previous 2 years combined. And when we finally said goodnight, it was not because we had run out of things to say, but because it was late, and she had an early site visit, and I had a garden to water before the heat came back. After I hung up, I sat outside a while longer. The stars were out in full, and the summer dark smelled of grass and something the garden was still learning to be. There's a lesson I've spent 67 years learning, which is this. You cannot protect someone from a truth they're determined not to see. All you can do is love them long enough, and hold firm enough, and give them enough silence to eventually hear their own conscience. It is the hardest kind of patience there is. It is the kind that costs you sleep and birthdays and years of proximity that you cannot get back. But when it works, when the person you spent your whole life building the world for finally stands up on their own 2 feet and holds them steady, there is nothing quieter or more complete than that. I went inside. I turned on the light above the kitchen table. I set the coffee going for the morning. Tomorrow I was going to go see about some biscuits.